What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about why this 2024-25 NBA season will be legendary. Guys, the wait is almost over. The NBA season is about to start for this year. I'm so excited. There's so many teams to talk about in the Eastern Conference and of course the loaded Western Conference. We can start there in the Western Conference. Obviously the Dallas Mavericks, who made the finals last year, adding in Klay Thompson and other pieces to fill out their depth to try to make another finals run. You have the Denver Nuggets, of course, they're still with the reigning three-time MVP and Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray adding a player like Russell Westbrook. We'll see how things go there because they also let go of KCP, who signed with the Orlando Magic. So there's some storylines there too, but there's a plethora of teams to talk about in the West. Memphis Grizzlies coming back with Ja Morant. That's going to be really intriguing. If he can stay healthy, that team is going to be right back to where they were a couple of seasons ago in the top of the West, in my opinion. But they'll also have competition with teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who got even better this past offseason. Were a 1 seed last year. Of course, have Shea, J-Dub, Chet. But they also added Alex Caruso. They added Isaiah Hartenstein from the Knicks. They're a young team on the rise. And Caruso is their oldest player, and he's 30 years old. So they have a lot there. Then, of course, you have the Lakers with LeBron. I know y'all saw Dr. Connect go off in that preseason game. I think, in my opinion, he's going to be the biggest impact to the Lakers right now, and he could really put them back into a contending type of area because they've been in this constant, utter phase of being constantly in and out of the play-in in the past 3 to 4 years, which is in purgatory. We knew that they weren't really going to be contenders. They made the Western Conference Finals in the 2023 season, I will say that, but besides that, we knew that they were going to lose to a team like the Nuggets and like they did the past 2 years. But a player like Dr. Connect and other pieces that they have can be consistent and play beneficial basketball with AD, with LeBron, under new head coach JJ Redick. They could have something cooking right there in LA. And then also the other LA team, the Los Angeles Clippers, Kawhi Leonard is out indefinitely. Man, there's gonna be conversation about him potentially retiring in terms of people thinking that he should. I don't know about that. That's not my place to say, just like in football with Tua. But I don't really take the Clippers seriously. That's just my opinion. Of course, they still have James Harden. They added people like Kevin Porter Jr. They still have Tyronn Lue, who's one of the best coaches in the league. But are they really championship contenders? I don't know about that. Then you have the Pelicans with Zion. Brandon Ingram kind of disgruntled because he wants a contract extension. They also traded for DeJounte Murray. There's just a lot of teams to talk about, guys. And also my favorite team, the Houston Rockets. One of the most deepest teams in the league. Don't be surprised if they make the playoffs. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are like a 6 seed this season. But more on that later, because I know a lot of people will be like, what are you talking about? But ultimately, it doesn't matter right now because the reigning champs in the Boston Celtics, they are favored to go back to back. And we will see about that. They are essentially bringing the same roster back. Only time will tell, but we're going to talk about both the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference, and the biggest storyline for this season and why it's going to be legendary. So with that being said, guys, before I dive even further into this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know what we post about here. Videos about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, cooking videos, reels, things of that nature. With that being said, let's talk about this NBA season that's upcoming. So keeping a common theme, because we do know that the Western Conference is loaded, I want to talk about the Eastern Conference first a little bit. I mentioned the Boston Celtics, of course, being the reigning champions at the end of the intro. Well, that team is also going to have a chip on their shoulder. Everyone knows the lack of playing time that Jason Tatum had in the Olympics is going to be smoked when they play against Golden State, and really just this season. It seems like he has a huge chip on his shoulder. I haven't watched the starting 5 series in its entirety yet, but you can just tell just some of the behind the scenes things and what he puts into the game and just some of his perspective and how he deals with all the outside noise, because a lot of people hate on Jason Tatum. I'm not going to lie about that. And a lot of people hate the Celtics too. I really realized that in the playoffs and the finals this past year. But beyond that, and also Jaylen Brown, who saw 3 of his teammates, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, and Derek White, who got called up when Kawhi Leonard left to be on the Olympic team. They didn't even try to hit up Jaylen Brown. Maybe that's a Nike thing. Maybe that's a Team USA thing. I don't know, but Jaylen Brown is definitely going to be fueled by that. But that's even more adversity for them to be inspired by. Of course, Joe Mazzulla is going to fry that into their brains and really try to get the best out of his players from that. And Porzingis, of course, he isn't starting the season, but he will be back sometime in the near future. So they have a loaded roster still. Have Drew, have Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Even people off the bench like Peyton Pritchard play solid, always making half-court shots. Sorry, I'm still a little salty because I'm a Luka fan from the finals. But yeah, that Celtics team is just loaded. They still should be the favorites. I know you have teams like the Knicks, who just recently acquired Karl-Anthony Towns. They're a little thinner in terms of their depth now. Of course, making that trade, not having Dante DiVincenzo anymore, and shipping out Julius Randle. But I will say the Knicks and the Sixers, they will be contenders to the Celtics. I don't know how big of a threat they will pose to them. Only time will tell. Even with the Sixers, because Paul George hyperextended his knee, praying that he'll be able to be okay. It looks like there's no serious damage, so that's a blessing. But for the Knicks, they have a really good team. They're intriguing to me. It just really depends on how things are executed with their roster. Like I mentioned, they have Cat now. They also acquired Mikal Bridges, have Jalen Brunson still, have OG Anunoby, who's one of the most underrated players in the league in my opinion. Even Kill will lock up your favorite player and provide solid production offensively as well too. So I like OG there. Josh Hart, also one of the more underrated players in the league, just scrappy. Does everything you ask him to do. If he's on your team, you love that. A player that you love to have on your team, a player you hate to play against. And Mitchell Robinson, whenever he returns, the biggest thing with him is just being healthy, because he's one of the best shot blockers in the league when he is healthy, but he has have to underline when he is healthy, because there's always a question about that. And Top Thibodeau, you know how good of a coach he is. The conversation is always the minutes with him, and especially with the depth not being as prominent now, that's going to be a question mark. But this team will still be solid in my opinion, and they'll be able to make things work. But for the Sixers, shifting gears there, Joel Embiid, it looks like he said that he might not play back-to-backs for the rest of his career, and that's understandably so because they want to keep him ready and fresh for the postseason. I think adding Paul George will definitely help that team have a chance to finally make the conference finals, because in the Embiid era, in the trust the process era, they still haven't been to the conference finals. That could come to fruition. Tyrese Maxey is a budding superstar, continues to cook, continues to get better each and every year, and we saw that in the playoffs last year, and him also being an all-star too. But that's definitely the three-headed monster there in terms of the Eastern Conference. Of course, you have to look at the Bucks too as well. Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo having a full training camp together, and just time to reacclimate with each other with that roster. There's a lot of question marks there with that team. Of course, Giannis pending free agency, pending maybe wanting to ask out at some point. I don't know about that. We will see. But only one team can represent the Eastern Conference in the finals. So that's a intriguing conversation and situation to monitor. The Indiana Pacers, who also made the conference finals last year, having Pascal Siakam, having Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, they're a team. They're the fifth team that I talked about right now, and all these teams are really competitive. And you have the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're able to extend Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland back healthy. There's a lot of components there, and the Orlando Magic too, guys. There's a lot of talent, even in the Eastern Conference. We talk about the West all the time too, but the Eastern Conference, and I haven't even mentioned the Miami Heat yet. That's incredible to me. So the parity in the league is amazing. And the Heat, that's something right there too. Jimmy Butler, he seems to be locked in. Condolences to him for sure. Of course, his dad had passed, and saw some of that in the starting five series. He dealt with that in the 2023-24 season. There was a lot of conversation about him not playing. Kind of makes sense now, but this is a contract year for him. And if Jimmy Butler tees up this year, of course, with Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, having that Heat culture under Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley, they could be a fixture and a contender in the Eastern Conference too. We saw them make the finals in 2023, and we saw them making the finals in the bubble too. So can never truly count the Heat out. But in my opinion, it still goes through the Celtics, pending injury, things of that nature. That team is still very loaded. I would still pick them as the favorites in terms of making the finals. Winning the finals, we'll see. I mean, you kind of have to lean towards them being the favorite to win it all again. But like I said, that Western Conference is tough too. And we can shift gears to talking about the West right now. I think the most intriguing conversation in the West, well, really, there's a lot of them to be honest. I can't necessarily just pinpoint one. We can start off with the Denver Nuggets. We saw them win the championship in 2023. They lost in 7 games to the Minnesota Timberwolves in the conference semifinals last year, and we'll see how rejuvenated this roster is. Like I mentioned earlier, they brought in Russell Westbrook to have some more depth and playmaking for that team, but they also lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They have Michael Porter Jr. still though. They have Jamal Murray. They still have Aaron Gordon. They still have a good roster under Mike Malone, but we'll see after this past season, because there's been some excuses that I don't like that I've heard from Mike Malone, saying that the team was tired, things of that nature. Everyone's tired. I know they won the championship, but the Celtics aren't going to be using that excuse this year. They want to win it all again. They're hungry. Like, they still haven't won a championship yet. So I want to see how the Nuggets respond to losing in the second round of the playoffs when everyone expected them to not only make the finals but repeat again, and losing in the second round 2 rounds short. That'll be an intriguing conversation there. Talking about the team that they lost to in the second round, the Minnesota Timberwolves. At first, I really did not like the trade at all, trading Karl Anthony Towns, but I do understand it from a salary cap component, because you're not going to be able to spread the money around to pay your other players, potentially like a Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels. But I like what they did in the draft. They added Rob Dillingham, who's going to be so good for him. Future point guard, future backcourt with him and Anthony Edwards is going to go crazy, going ballistic. You already see the hezzies that he's had in the preseason. Oh my gosh, so tough. And even a player like Terrence Shannon Jr., I think he's going to be really good off the bench and provide some great energy for the Timberwolves offensively and defensively. You still have Ant, who's one of the top 10 players in the league. In my opinion, the best shooting guard in the league right now. Devin Booker is my favorite player currently after D Rose retired. Love D Rose forever. But in that first round series when the Timberwolves played the Suns, oh my gosh, D Book did play good in like the final few games. The Suns got cooked. So Anthony Edwards is definitely the best shooting guard in the league. But beyond that, with young players like that coming into fruition in Minnesota, you still have Rudy Gobert, who I know in the playoffs he got fried against the Mavericks. Like, sometimes he is unplayable, I'm not gonna lie. When you put him on the perimeter against players, that is barbecue chicken. That's just what it is. But no one's messing with him in the paint. But sometimes he is unplayable, so that's the conversation to be had there. But I think Julius Randle is gonna be really good for the Timberwolves roster. Sometimes he is super ball dominant. It's gonna be interesting to see the chemistry and the dynamic that him and Anthony Edwards end up having, but he's gonna be good. And Dante DiVincenzo, he's gonna be really nice for them. He has a chip on his shoulder. We saw that when they played against the Knicks in the preseason, talking to Tibbs, talking to Jalen Brunson's dad a little bit. He's coming with a little smoke, and I think that he's gonna be really beneficial for this Minnesota Timberwolves squad. So yeah, they traded Cap, but they got deeper as a bench and as a team overall, and they have more depth. So be on the watch for Anthony Edwards, especially going into his 5th season already in NBA. It's gonna be a movie for sure to see that team play. They always are dynamic. Anthony is always dynamic. Seeing Rob Dillingham with him for this season and for the future, that's gonna be a great thing up there in Minnesota. So there's a lot of optimism and great optimism up there for the Timberwolves. And then a team like I talked about a second ago, the Suns. So Devin Booker, like I said, he's my favorite player right now in the league. Him and Luka, those are my favorite two players for sure. I want to see what they're about this year. Can Bradley Beal stay healthy, and can him, KD, and D-Book mesh together? Because that's a huge conversation there. Mike Budenholzer, him being the coach now, we saw that he won that championship with the Bucks in 2021. I think he's an upgrade over Frank Vogel, even though Vogel's a solid coach too. But they're going to be solid. But they should be a better team. They also added in Tyus Jones at the point guard position, so thank God they finally have an actual point guard. They're not trying to run Devin Booker at the point guard. He can do it, but he's better as a scorer, man. He is a shooting guard. He gets buckets. So I'm glad that they finally have a player like Tyus Jones in there. Even another point guard, a backup point guard like Monte Morris. Just some more flexibility at the point guard position because they were really handicapped last year. So that's going to be good for them. I hope that they can make a run. Like I said, I'm a fan of Book and I'm a fan of Luka, so either the Suns or Mavs for me, I mean, I would be happy. Or the Rockets. Of course, the Rockets are my favorite team, but favorite players, those two. So I mean, kind of accordance to that. But the Suns, it's just really putting things together with them. They have to be healthy. Bradley Beal has to stay healthy. And at times when they did play together, it seems like he would just be sitting in the corner, not engaged, things of that nature. Hopefully Budenholzer can coach some of that out of them, put them in the greatest positions to score and be efficient with one another. Because if the Suns can do that, they can make the finals too. There's no doubt about that. They just have to put it together because you can't play games on paper. You have to play it between the lines on the court. So I hope the Suns do well. I mentioned the Mavericks as well too. Luka Doncic. We saw how great he was in the playoffs. Got a little gas at the end of the season. I think just with him, it just comes down to discipline in some areas because he is a disciplined player. He's a great player, but just being in shape, being more engaged. We saw that in instances where he did play more defense in the playoffs, but in the finals, the Celtics targeted him. Seems like he was gassed some, so that's an in-shape conditioning thing, kind of. But I think that he's going to be rejuvenated this year too. In my opinion, Luka should have won MVP last year. People are going to say Shea. I know Jokic won it, but Luka was going crazy last year, and he's going to continue to be crazy. In my opinion, he's a top 2 player in the league. You saw ESPN's list, which I do disagree on some things, but he was ranked the number 2 player in the league, rightfully so. After Jokic, he's going to continue to get better. And Luka and Kyrie, their chemistry, I love them together. They were able to mesh furthermore last year, and now adding in a player like Klay Thompson, who everyone wants to clown, but he was obviously not happy in his last season in Golden State. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder, and he's going to get easier shots with Luka and Kyrie on the court. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? Then they have players like Najee Marshall, who's a good 3-and-D player that they got from the Pelicans, and Quentin Grimes, who they traded for too. I think that the Mavericks, they're going to be lit again. The Western Conference is certainly a gauntlet. I'm not going to lie about that, but you can't sleep on them. And Derek Lively going into his second season, still having Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, Jason Kidd coaching well. This team is going to be right back into the mix of things, and you can't sleep on them at all. I talked about the Lakers a little bit earlier. Just with them, it just comes down to the little things because they've had enough talent. You have LeBron and AD on the same team. That's arguably the best duo in the league, just them together. Even LeBron almost being 40 years old because we saw how great of an athlete he still is in the Olympics. So them together, and I talked a little bit about Dalton Connect earlier. He can be a player that can be a Rookie of the Year this year, in my opinion. If he's not starting off the first game of the year, he will be starting soon because what he can add to the Lakers is not only shooting, but playmaking ability. And that's what they've needed, a third playmaker to be able to fit in LeBron's play style. Not everyone can play with LeBron. I'm not gonna lie. He plays differently. He's the small forward, but he's a point forward. He's basically a 6'9", 6'8" point guard. But if there's a player who can adapt and play off the catch and also off the dribble when they need to, that's a new element for the Lakers that they haven't really had too much. And besides that 2020 team that won the finals in the bubble, this team, they could be that good. We will see though. That's a lot of ifs though. So I'm not necessarily banking on the Lakers being championship contenders yet, but don't be surprised if that happens and if a player like Connect hoops, Austin Reeves continues to be good in spots, D'Angelo Russell being more consistent, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, who always gives them good minutes, and then a young player like Max Christie too, playing good with the opportunity. This team could be deep and this team could be a fixture, but only time will tell with them. The Lakers are always unpredictable. They're always going to be talked about for sure in LA. It's just for them to get things together. And I think JJ Redick, he's a great basketball mind, and we will see that at some point this year. One of the players that we have to talk about, of course, that's in the thumbnail is Victor Wembanyama, and how this Spurs team, in my opinion, should be improved. Adding in Chris Paul, Wemby is finally going to get the looks that he deserves, especially at times last season when people would miss him. Just throw him the ball. He's 7'5". Like, come on now. Chris Paul is going to be great for him. We saw how he's made players like Clint Capella great when he was in Houston. Some of his rapport with Jonathan Kuminga with the Warriors last year. And now with Chris Paul going to the Spurs, being under Popovich, two excellent basketball minds. Some of the great basketball minds ever with Chris Paul and Greg Popovich. That's going to be great for Victor Wembanyama's development. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he's an MVP candidate this year. You can almost book it, in my opinion. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year easily. Going to be an all-star this year. I think he should have been an all-star last year, even though the team was not good. So adding in Chris Paul is going to be really beneficial for Wemby's rapid development because he's already one of the top 20 players in the league, in my estimation, in my opinion. And then I have to talk about a player like Harrison Barnes too, who's going to be good there. But in my opinion, arguably behind Chris Paul, this is their biggest acquisition, drafting Stephon Castle out of UConn. I know a lot of people want to clown this year's draft for for not being the strongest. But Stephon Castle, I think he's going to be really good for the Spurs going forward. And a lot of people talk about the Spurs trading their second draft pick, who ended up being Rob Dillingham. That could look bad in the future, but I think Stephon Castle, he's going to be really dynamic with Wemby, not only this year, but just going into the future, because he played on that UConn team that won a national championship for a second year in a row, and he adapted to his role well. And we've seen players in the past who were high draft picks in the first round, played on winning teams in college, end up rising to the occasion even more in the NBA and becoming great players. Now, I know a player like Devin Booker, they didn't win the championship at Kentucky, but they only lost one game, which was in the NCAA tournament against Wisconsin. We see how great he is, and he was drafted in the middle of the first round from the Suns, started off the bench, then continued to advance in his role. See what the player he is now going into his 10th season. I think Stephon Castle, even though he was picked earlier in the first round, obviously being the 4th pick, I believe, he's going to hoop for them. I think that offensively and defensively, he's very versatile as a shooting guard, point guard hybrid, I would say, about Castle. Defensively, he buys in. We know that obviously him playing for UConn, and I think that he can develop into a really good and dynamic scorer for the Spurs. So just be on the watch for them, because I think the Spurs should make the play-in. That should be the goal for them. That should be a goal for the other team in Texas, the Houston Rockets, my favorite team. Yes, sir. This team is deep. The Rockets, oh my gosh. First of all, we obviously know Jalen Green, Alfred Sengun. People need to stop talking about trying to trade Jalen Green. It's ridiculous to me, bro. I know at times it doesn't look the greatest when Sengun and Green play together, but give it another year this season, especially with all the buy-in, all the other players that's coming back. Tari Eason finally healthy. Reed Shepherd, he's gonna be another candidate potentially for Rookie of the Year. I know he probably won't be starting because you have Fred VanVleet there, but he's gonna be really dynamic for them offensively and defensively. We've seen him buy in. A lot of people wouldn't expect that defensively. He shot 50% at Kentucky in his freshman year last year. He's a sharpshooter, gets buckets. I saw him personally in the summer league in July. Then also you have other players like Cam Whitmore, who was really good as a rookie last year, continuing to come into his own. A veteran like Steven Adams, I think he's going to be great for the roster, great for Houston for sure. Amen Thompson, he was hurt a little last year, but when he played, he was really good. He's a great playmaker, and he's going to continue to get better too. One player I'm particularly locked in on is Jabari Smith Jr. going into his 3rd season. 3rd pick overall. A lot of people have talked about him not meeting the expectation of that so far. I want to see how his development is this year and how he gets better, because that'll be an interesting conversation with him there. But I'm telling you, the Rockets, they have a good problem because they have too much talent right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if they make a trade in terms of getting value for some potential expiring contracts and things like that. They also have Dylan Brooks, who I didn't mention too. There's a lot of good players. I'm telling you, this team, there's no reason why they shouldn't be in the playoffs or a 7-6 seed. I've heard a lot of people say that, oh, they should make the play-in for sure, but playoffs, bro, they won 19 more games in the 2024 season than they did in the 2022-23 season. They won 22 games in the last season of Steven Silas, and then last year with Ime Udoka implementing his culture and his coaching scheme, they won 41 games. That's a 19 game improvement. So you don't think that they'll win like 7-8 more games minimum? They can win 49-50 games, and I know that could still have you in a play-in in the Western Conference, but I think this team is gonna make the playoffs. I know I'm a Rockets fan, so you might think I'm biased a little bit, but I think it's reasonable to say that they're a deep team, and as long as they can continue to get things together, we see how great of a coach that Ime Udoka is, putting his players in spots to be successful, they'll be lit for sure. So I'm liking things as a Houston Rockets fan and just a fan of basketball, because this team has a lot of young talent. And speaking about the other team with young talent, I mentioned them a little bit earlier, the Oklahoma City Thunder. 1st seed last year in the playoffs, had a little inexperience. We saw that when they ran into the Mavericks, losing in 6 games, but they're going to be better this year. And with a player like Alex Caruso, who's a great defensive player, one of the best defensive players in the league at the guard position, and a Lou Dort, who's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league as well too, they're going to be locking down some defense. I'm not going to lie. Isaiah Hartenstein, another good acquisition for them. That's going to be great for that Oklahoma City Thunder roster. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, top 5 player in this league. We see how dynamic he is at the mid-range. His defensive ability as well too. Just an electric player, electric scorer. Just love his game and the development of players like both Jalen Williams, Jalen Dub Williams. See how good he is. I believe he averaged 19 points per game last season. And Chet Holmgren. He's a player that is really dynamic, and he could even be an all-star type of player this year in the Western Conference front court, because Chet, he has all the tools to be great, and we saw that last year. Everyone's going to talk about his size a little bit, being a little frail, but how lanky he is, how he can score so effortlessly. I think that Chet and Shai, they're going to be a great duo for Oklahoma City going forward, but that team overall is nice, and I like what they're doing in Oklahoma City. So you can see the common theme of what I'm saying about all these teams, why this season will be legendary. It's a lot of parity. That's the story of these past few years. I love it because we know with the Cleveland Golden State Warriors days and all that stuff ensued, 4 finals in a row of that same matchup, but now you don't necessarily know who's coming out. Like I said, a lot of people might predict the Celtics to come out, which is fair, but you can't necessarily count out the Knicks or the Sixers all the way too. We will see. But running through a few more teams before we get out of here. I don't want the video to be too long, but love hoops, NBA my favorite sport, so I love talking about it. Teams like the Golden State Warriors, I wonder how that'll look. First season without Klay Thompson since the 2010-11 season, adding in players like a Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson, Slow-Mo, a lot of different players like that with Steph. How will they continue to play? Because Steph is still playing at an all-time great level. level? How also will the young players step up like a Jonathan Kuminga, who we saw improve vastly last year? Also, Brandon Podziemski going into his second season, he was a really good rookie last year too. How will he play in his sophomore season in the NBA? Only time will tell. Draymond Green, of course, still being there. Andrew Wiggins too. So this Warriors team is good too, but we saw that there was a lot of inconsistent problems with them, not only last season, but in the 2022-23 season after Jordan Poole punch and all things of that nature. That really just made a downfall for them. So how will they respond? The Sacramento Kings too, adding in a player like DeMar DeRozan too to that team. They were the second seed in the 22-23 season, but they missed the playoffs in the play-in last year. So how would they respond after acquiring him? Still having De'Aaron Fox, still having Domantas Sabonis. I think that team is really talented too. They're just so much talent. It's insane to me. But they definitely have a chance in the West too to compete. The Pelicans, having Zion, having DeJounte Murray, who they just traded for. Still having CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram. Will he end up being traded, or will they end up finally negotiating a contract with him? We will see there. I don't know, but they have a lot of talent there. Just the really thing hinges with the New Orleans Pelicans is Zion's health, because if he's not healthy, this team is not a contender. But if he is healthy, you could talk about the Pelicans potentially making the conference finals or even the finals, because they have that much talent, but it's really about them putting everything together. Also, I'm kind of hesitant on them too because of their lack of versatility and depth at the center position. They don't have Valanciunas anymore. He's with the Wizards now, so we'll see what they do there. They also have Trey Murphy. I'm telling you, they have a lot of guys, but if Zion can't stay healthy, it really doesn't matter. And then the Los Angeles Clippers, I talked about them some, about Kawhi's injury that's indefinite right now. They're not contenders in my opinion. It's just really that simple. Yeah, they have James Harden who can still cook at times, but they just don't have enough. Especially with Paul George being gone now, I would give them more of a chance if they still had him. I know they have Tyronn Lue as a coach too, but them being in a new Intuit Dome, I mean, that's cool, that's cute and all that, but I don't think they're gonna win anything significant there, at least in the near future. How the roster is currently constructed, I could be wrong with how loaded the Western Conference is with all the teams I just mentioned. I don't really see the Clippers doing too much this season. And sorry if I didn't talk about your favorite team, if your team's like the Pistons or the Trailblazers or the Wizards. Shout out to my guy Mitchell. Most definitely be trying to get Cooper Flag in the 2025 draft, because what is there to talk about there? But I want to talk about the Grizzlies a little bit more, because I failed to mention them having Zach Edey now. I think that he's going to be really dynamic for that team too. His size and his presence. Pause. I always got to pause it. But the Grizzlies team, they should be, like I said earlier, contenders in the West. It just really comes down to the health of Ja Morant, just like the Pelicans with the health of Zion Williamson, because a player like that, he makes or breaks your team in terms of availability. So you need them to be available. But this season is going to be legendary because of all the parity in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. There's just so much. And looking forward to this year. It's been a long time coming. Beautiful time to be an NBA fan, and just looking forward to this season. So let me know in the comments down below some of your biggest storylines going into this season, some of your predictions, who you think is going to be contenders, surprise teams, things like that. Because we're going to have a lot of NBA content, of course, this year coming. So y'all stay tuned and let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. I appreciate you guys watching. Always make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, reels, content, things of that nature. More videos are on the way, guys. NBA season, we almost here. Let's go. If you're watching when an NBA season has already started, yes sir, we're here. So excited. Know that you are loved, you matter, you have purpose, God loves you, Jesus loves you, you are beautifully and wonderfully made. Y'all have a good one. Y'all be blessed.